The Curse of the Bermuda Triangle, A Journey into the Unknown. The date is December 5, 1945. 5 torpedo bombers sliced through the afternoon sky over the Atlantic Ocean, their engines humming in perfect formation. Flight 19, a routine training mission, should have been unremarkable. Just another day for 14 experienced naval aviators. But within hours, these men and their aircraft would vanish without a trace, swallowed by an expansive ocean that would become synonymous with one of the greatest mysteries in human history. The last transmission crackles through the radio. We don't know where we are. The water is green, not white. We're completely lost. Then, silence. And when a rescue plane carrying 13 more men takes off to find them, it too disappears into the void, as if the ocean itself had opened its jaws and consumed everything whole. This is the Bermuda Triangle, and what you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about the world around you. Imagine, for just a moment, standing on the deck of a ship in the middle of the ocean. The sun beats down on calm waters stretching endlessly in every direction. Your instruments suddenly spin wildly, pointing in impossible directions. Your radio fills with static and ghostly voices. The compass needle spins like a roulette wheel. The electronic equipment sparks and dies. And then, as you look up at the sky, you see clouds forming into shapes that defy meteorological explanation, spiraling downward as if reality itself is bending. You are in one of the most traveled shipping lanes in the world, yet you have never felt more alone, more vulnerable, more certain that you have crossed some invisible threshold into a place where the normal rules simply do not apply. This is not science fiction. This is not folklore whispered around campfires. These are accounts documented by pilots, ship captains, Coast Guard officials, and military personnel. People trained to observe, to report, to remain calm under pressure. And yet their voices shake when they describe what happened to them in this particular stretch of ocean. The Bermuda Triangle encompasses roughly 500,000 square miles of ocean between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. To put that in perspective, it's an area larger than Texas, larger than France, larger than the entire Iberian Peninsula. It's a region that sees thousands of vessels and aircraft pass through it every single year. Most make it through without incident. But some don't. And the ones that don't leave behind mysteries that have baffled investigators for generations. Ask yourself this: what would it feel like to watch every instrument you depend on fail simultaneously, to know that something is happening that shouldn't be possible, yet undeniably is? What would you do in those final moments when you realize that rescue might never come because no one will ever know where you are? The story of the Bermuda Triangle doesn't begin in 1945 with Flight 19, though that's the incident that captured the world's attention. It begins centuries earlier, when Christopher Columbus himself sailed through these waters in 1492. In his ship's log, Columbus recorded strange phenomena that disturbed him deeply. Compass readings that made no sense, a fireball that fell from the sky into the ocean, and on September 15th of that year, he witnessed something that shook even his seasoned nerves. He saw a mysterious light on the horizon, dancing and flickering in ways that no lighthouse or ship lantern ever could. His crew became restless, superstitious, certain they were sailing into cursed waters. Columbus, trying to maintain order, kept these observations quiet, but he couldn't deny what his own eyes had seen, what his instruments were telling him. Think about that for a moment. 500 years ago, before modern navigation, before radio, before radar, the very first European explorer to chart these waters felt that something was wrong here. Something that transcended his understanding of the natural world. But Columbus was not alone in his unease. For centuries, sailors whispered about this region. They called it the Devil's Triangle, the limbo of the lost, the Hoodoo Sea. Maritime records from the Spanish colonial period are filled with accounts of ships that simply never arrived at their destinations. Entire treasure fleets, carrying gold and silver from the New World back to Spain, vanished in these waters. Some were caught in storms, that much we know from recovered records. But others disappeared on calm, clear days when the sea was as smooth as glass. The indigenous peoples of the Caribbean had their own stories about these waters long before Europeans arrived. The Lucayan people of the Bahamas spoke of a place where the water spirits grew angry, where the boundary between the living world and the world beyond grew thin. They avoided certain areas during certain times of the year, reading signs in the clouds and the behavior of seabirds that we've long since forgotten how to interpret. Were these merely superstitions, or had they observed patterns that our modern minds, so focused on technological explanations, have overlooked? Picture the scene. It's the year 1800, and you're aboard a merchant vessel sailing from Jamaica to Charleston. The weather is perfect, the sea calm, the stars bright overhead. You're making good time. The crew is in high spirits. Then, without warning, the ship begins to shudder. The sails, moments ago full and taut with a steady wind, suddenly hang limp. The air becomes oppressively still, yet the water around you begins to churn as if stirred by some massive, invisible hand. The temperature drops 20 degrees in as many seconds. Your skin prickles with static electricity. And in the distance, you see something that makes your blood run cold, a wall of fog rolling toward you at impossible speed, glowing faintly from within with a sickly, phosphorescent light. This is not the dramatization of a horror film. This is a composite of dozens of actual accounts recorded in maritime logs throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. Ships that survived these encounters describe phenomena that sound like something from another dimension entirely. But let's move forward in time to when the mystery truly exploded into public consciousness. The year is 1918. World War I is drawing to a close. The USS Cyclops, a massive naval cargo ship over 500 feet long, carrying 306 people and 10,000 tons of manganese ore, departs from Barbados bound for Baltimore. The weather is good. The ship is seaworthy. The crew is experienced. The captain, George Worley, is a veteran of decades at sea. The Cyclops never sends a distress signal. It never reports any problems. It simply vanishes as completely as if it had been erased from existence. Now, ships sink. This is a tragic but known reality of maritime travel. What makes the Cyclops different is that no wreckage was ever found. No bodies. No debris. No oil slick. Nothing. Despite extensive searches covering thousands of square miles of ocean, the largest ship in the U.S. Navy to disappear without trace during peacetime was simply gone. 306 people, thousands of tons of metal and cargo, obliterated so thoroughly that the ocean gave up not a single clue. President Woodrow Wilson himself commented on the disappearance, stating, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." But here's what makes this even more disturbing. 23 years later, both of the Cyclops sister ships, the Proteus and the Nereus, vanished in the same region under almost identical circumstances. Same route. Same weather conditions. Same complete absence of wreckage or survivors. Same impenetrable silence. What are the odds of that happening by chance? What are the statistical probabilities that three sister ships, built to the same specifications, would all disappear in the same area of ocean decades apart, leaving identical mysteries behind? Ask yourself, is this coincidence, or is something else at work? Flight 19 remains the most famous disappearance, and for good reason. Unlike ships that vanish beneath the waves where anything might happen unseen, Flight 19 was in constant radio communication until the moment it wasn't. We have transcripts of exactly what happened, a minute-by-minute documentation of experienced aviators becoming increasingly disoriented, confused, and desperate. Lieutenant Charles Taylor was leading the flight. He was no rookie. He had over 2,500 hours of flight time. His four wingmen were also experienced. They were flying Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, reliable aircraft with an excellent safety record. The mission was simple, a routine navigation training exercise that they'd all done before. 2 hours out, 2 hours back, flying over familiar waters in good visibility. At 3:45 p.m., Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station received the first troubling transmission. Taylor radioed that his compasses had failed, both of them. Both compasses on his aircraft, independently malfunctioning at the same time. Already, this was unusual. But what happened next was unprecedented. Taylor reported that he couldn't determine where they were. He thought they might be over the Florida Keys, though they should have been over the Bahamas. Other pilots in the flight reported that they couldn't see land when they should have been able to. The ocean below them was the wrong color. Taylor's voice, initially calm and professional, grew increasingly agitated. "We can't find west. Everything is wrong. We can't be sure of any direction. Everything looks strange, even the ocean." Listen to those words. Everything looks strange, even the ocean. What does that mean? How can experienced naval aviators, flying in clear weather over waters they know intimately, not recognize the ocean? The control tower tried to guide them back, but the transmissions became increasingly garbled. Other pilots in the flight reported that their compasses were also spinning uselessly. Without compasses, in an era before GPS, pilots relied on dead reckoning and visual landmarks. But they couldn't see the landmarks they expected, and their calculations weren't adding up. It was as if they'd been transported to somewhere that looked similar but wasn't quite right, like a parallel version of the Atlantic Ocean where nothing aligned with their training and experience. At some point, Taylor made a fateful decision. Believing they were over the Gulf of Mexico, which they absolutely were not, he ordered the flight to head northeast, thinking this would take them to land. Instead, it took them deeper into the Atlantic, farther from shore, farther from any hope of finding their way back. The last clear transmission came at 7:04 p.m. After that, only silence. 5 aircraft, 14 men, gone. The Navy launched the largest air and sea search in its history at that time. They found nothing. Not a life raft. Not a scrap of metal. Not a single piece of debris. In an ocean where wreckage can float for months, where oil slicks can persist for weeks, there was absolutely nothing. But the nightmare wasn't over. A Martin Mariner flying boat, carrying 13 crew members, took off to search for Flight 19. This was a large, sturdy aircraft designed for long-range ocean patrol. The crew was trained for search and rescue. They knew these waters. 23 minutes after takeoff, the Mariner radioed that it was approaching the search area. Then, it too vanished. The official explanation was that it likely exploded due to a fuel leak. The Martin Mariners were nicknamed flying gas tanks because of their tendency to leak fumes. A ship in the area reported seeing an explosion and a fireball on the water. But here's what doesn't add up. If the Mariner exploded on the surface, there should have been wreckage. These planes didn't disintegrate into molecules. They left behind floating debris, oil slicks, personal effects. Yet when search crews arrived at the reported location, they found the same thing they found for Flight 19. Nothing. The ocean was empty, calm, and utterly indifferent to the 27 men who had just ceased to exist. In total, within the span of a few hours on December 5, 1945, 6 aircraft and 27 men vanished in the Bermuda Triangle without leaving behind a single tangible piece of evidence that they had ever been there. The Navy Board of Inquiry spent months investigating. Their conclusion was troubling in its ambiguity. We are not able to even make a good guess as to what happened. The official report later changed Taylor's status from causes or reasons unknown to pilot error, but this was largely to avoid having to pay death benefits. The original investigators knew that pilot error alone couldn't explain what had happened. Ask yourself, how does pilot error cause every piece of navigational equipment to fail? How does pilot error make the ocean look wrong? How does pilot error cause 5 separate aircraft, with 5 separate pilots, all experiencing the same disorientation simultaneously? The disappearances didn't stop with Flight 19. In fact, they seemed to accelerate. The Star Tiger, a British South American Airways aircraft, vanished in 1948 while flying from the Azores to Bermuda. The plane was in radio contact with Bermuda, reporting that they expected to arrive on schedule, that weather was excellent, that everything was fine. They never arrived. No distress signal. No wreckage. 25 passengers and 6 crew, gone. 1 year later, the Star Tiger's sister aircraft, the Star Ariel, disappeared on a flight from Bermuda to Jamaica. Same airline, same route, same mysterious silence. The pilot radioed at 10 in the morning that all was well, weather clear, systems functioning perfectly. By noon, when the plane should have landed, nothing. Extensive searches revealed nothing. The British government launched a formal investigation. Their conclusion, published in the official report, was chilling in its honesty. What happened in this case will never be known, and the fate of Star Ariel must remain an unsolved mystery. Think about what that means. A government, with all its resources, all its experts, all its investigative power, officially stating that an aircraft disappeared in circumstances so baffling that they cannot even theorize what might have happened. This wasn't a classified military secret. This wasn't information being withheld from the public. This was an admission that something occurred which defied all conventional explanation. The Douglas DC-3 disappearance in 1948 adds another layer to the mystery. This aircraft was flying from Puerto Rico to Miami with 32 people aboard. At 4:13 a.m., the pilot radioed that they were 50 miles south of Miami, approaching for landing, that everything was normal. At 4:13 a.m., those were the last words anyone ever heard from them. The plane should have landed within half an hour. It didn't. And once again, despite perfect weather and calm seas, no trace of the aircraft was ever found. Here's what's particularly unsettling about this case. The DC-3 was equipped with life rafts that would automatically deploy and inflate upon water impact. These rafts were designed to be visible for miles, with bright colors and radar reflectors. If the plane had crashed into the ocean, even if it had sunk immediately, these rafts should have been floating on the surface. Search planes flew grid patterns over the entire area. Ships scoured the waters. Nothing. It was as if the plane had dematerialized 50 miles from one of the busiest airports in the United States. The SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a tanker ship carrying molten sulfur, vanished in February 1963. This was a 500-foot-long steel vessel with a crew of 39. It sent routine radio messages, then fell silent. When the ship failed to arrive at its destination, search teams found a few scattered pieces of debris, life preservers, name boards, fragments. But here's what makes no sense. The debris that was found was scattered over an impossibly wide area, as if the ship hadn't just sunk but had somehow been torn apart and scattered across hundreds of square miles of ocean. Maritime experts couldn't explain the debris pattern. If the ship had exploded, there would have been more wreckage in a more concentrated area. If it had sunk intact, there would have been less debris and different items floating. The pattern suggested something that didn't fit any known maritime disaster scenario. Would you trust your instruments if you were sailing through these waters? Would you trust your training, your experience, your senses, when so many others who trusted exactly those things simply ceased to exist? The Ellen Austin case from 1881 deserves special attention because it's so utterly bizarre that it seems like fiction, yet it's documented in maritime records. The Ellen Austin was an American schooner that encountered a derelict vessel drifting in the Bermuda Triangle. The ship was in perfect condition, sails set, cargo intact, no damage, no signs of struggle or disaster. But there was no crew, not a single person aboard. The captain of the Ellen Austin, seeing an opportunity to claim the ship as salvage, put a prize crew aboard and arranged to sail both vessels to port. The two ships set sail together. Then a storm separated them. When the weather cleared, the Ellen Austin found the derelict ship again. And here's where the story becomes truly unsettling. The prize crew was gone. The ship was once again completely empty, as if the men had never been there. According to some versions of the account, the captain put another crew aboard. and they too vanished. Now, some historians dispute parts of this story, arguing that details have been embellished over time. But what's not in dispute is that a derelict vessel was found, that a prize crew was placed aboard, and that something went wrong. The core mystery remains: what happened to the original crew, and what happened to the men who boarded afterward? Here's where we need to pause and address something crucial. Not every disappearance in the Bermuda Triangle is mysterious. Not every loss defies explanation. Ships sink because of storms, structural failures, human error. Aircraft crash because of mechanical problems, weather, navigation mistakes. The ocean is dangerous, and the Bermuda Triangle is one of the most heavily traveled shipping routes in the world. Statistically, accidents will happen. The question isn't whether accidents happen. Of course they do. The question is whether they happen more frequently in this region, and whether some of them display characteristics that can't be explained by conventional means. Skeptics point out that the number of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is not statistically higher than in other heavily traveled parts of the ocean. The U.S. Coast Guard states that the area doesn't have any more accidents than any other comparable region. And this is true, based on the raw numbers. But numbers alone don't tell the whole story. What sets the Bermuda Triangle apart isn't just the quantity of disappearances, it's the quality. It's the pattern of vanishings that leave no trace, that occur in perfect weather, that involve experienced crews reporting impossible phenomena just before contact is lost. The Lloyd's of London Shipping Insurance Company has stated that the Bermuda Triangle is no more dangerous than any other part of the ocean. Insurance rates for ships passing through the triangle aren't any higher than for other routes. This is often cited as evidence that the entire mystery is overblown. But consider this. Insurance companies base their rates on historical loss data and statistical risk models. They're measuring the probability that a ship will be lost. What they're not measuring, what they can't measure, is the nature of those losses, the circumstances surrounding them, the phenomena reported by survivors. So we have a paradox. The statistical data suggests nothing unusual. Yet the documented accounts describe events that shouldn't be possible. How do we reconcile these two realities? Let's examine the theories that have been proposed over the decades, because there are 11 major explanations that serious researchers have put forward, each attempting to solve this puzzle from a different angle. Theory 1. Methane hydrate eruptions. This is one of the more scientifically grounded theories, and it's genuinely frightening in its implications. Scientists have discovered massive deposits of methane hydrate on the ocean floor in the Bermuda Triangle region. Methane hydrate is basically frozen methane, trapped in a crystalline structure of water molecules. Under the right conditions, changes in temperature or pressure, these deposits can suddenly release massive amounts of gas. Imagine what happens when billions of cubic feet of methane suddenly erupt from the ocean floor. The gas rises through the water in enormous bubbles. Here's the crucial part. Methane reduces the density of water. A ship floating on water depends on that water's density to stay afloat, following Archimedes' principle. But if the water suddenly becomes mixed with enormous amounts of gas, its density drops precipitously. A ship in that area would suddenly lose buoyancy and could sink in seconds, dragged down so fast that the crew wouldn't even have time to radio for help, so violently that the ship could break apart on the way down, explaining why some wrecks are never found intact. For aircraft, the danger is different but equally deadly. Methane is lighter than air. A massive release of methane could create a cloud that rises into the lower atmosphere. If an aircraft flies through this cloud, the sudden change in air density would cause a loss of lift. The engines could flame out from the sudden change in air mixture. The plane could literally drop from the sky. And if it crashed into an area where the ocean surface was still churning with methane bubbles, it would sink rapidly, leaving no debris field. Laboratory experiments have demonstrated this principle. Scientists have created small-scale models showing that ships placed in water saturated with gas bubbles sink almost instantly, without time to send distress signals or deploy lifeboats. Geological surveys have found evidence of massive ancient methane eruptions in the Bermuda Triangle region. Craters on the ocean floor hundreds of feet across where sudden releases blew out the seabed. But here's the limitation of this theory. While it might explain some sudden disappearances, it doesn't explain the navigational equipment failures, the strange visual phenomena, the reports of compasses spinning wildly before ships were lost. Methane eruptions are violent, catastrophic events, not gradual disorientation. And they certainly don't explain Flight 19's 2-hour ordeal of increasing confusion before the final disappearance. Theory 2. Rogue waves. The ocean is capable of generating waves far larger and more destructive than average swells. These rogue waves, sometimes called freak waves, can reach heights of over 100 feet, appearing suddenly in otherwise calm seas. For centuries, sailors reported these massive walls of water, but scientists dismissed them as exaggerations or myths. Then, in 1995, the Dropner wave was measured by instruments on an oil platform in the North Sea, an 84-foot wave in an area where the significant wave height was only 40 feet. This confirmed that rogue waves are real. The Bermuda Triangle's unique geography might make it particularly prone to rogue waves. Ocean currents converge here, including the Gulf Stream, which can flow at speeds of over 5 miles per hour. When waves generated by different weather systems interact with these currents, they can combine in ways that create these monstrous anomalies. A ship encountering a rogue wave has almost no warning and no time to react. The wave can roll a vessel over, break it in half, or drive it straight to the bottom. For smaller aircraft flying at low altitudes, a rogue wave wouldn't directly affect them, but the weather conditions that create rogue waves, sudden, localized storm cells, could appear with little warning and bring violent winds, severe turbulence, and disorienting conditions. This theory has merit for some disappearances, particularly ships lost during rough weather. But it falls short for the same reason the methane theory does. It doesn't explain the calm weather disappearances, the equipment malfunctions, the reports of unusual phenomena. A rogue wave is dramatic and deadly, but it's still just a wave. It doesn't make compasses fail. It doesn't change the color of the ocean. It doesn't cause entire flights of aircraft to become disoriented simultaneously. Theory 3. Magnetic anomalies and compass variation. The Earth's magnetic field isn't uniform. There are places where it's stronger, weaker, or disturbed by local geological conditions. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align, or at least come very close. This is called the agonic line. For navigators relying on magnetic compasses, this can cause confusion if they're not aware of it and don't compensate properly. Furthermore, there are magnetic anomalies in the region, areas where the magnetic field is disturbed by underwater geological formations, concentrations of magnetic minerals, or other factors not fully understood. These anomalies could cause compass needles to spin or point in wrong directions. Before the advent of GPS, compass navigation was critical. A malfunctioning compass could lead a ship or aircraft far off course. Some researchers have proposed that there might be periodic or intermittent magnetic disturbances in the region, possibly linked to solar activity, geomagnetic storms, or unknown geological processes. These disturbances could affect not just compasses but all electronic equipment, causing widespread instrument failure. This theory is attractive because it directly addresses one of the most commonly reported phenomena: compass and navigational equipment failures. Flight 19's experience fits this perfectly. Multiple compass failures, spatial disorientation, inability to determine direction. But it doesn't explain disappearances that leave no trace, nor does it account for the visual anomalies reported by survivors, the strange clouds, the wrong-colored water, the electromagnetic phenomena. Theory 4. Human error and environmental hazards. This is the most prosaic explanation, and in many ways the most difficult to argue against because it's undoubtedly true for at least some of the incidents. The Bermuda Triangle presents several genuine navigational challenges. The Gulf Stream is powerful and can push vessels far off course quickly. The weather can change rapidly, with severe storms developing with little warning. The area has numerous shallow shoals, reefs, and hazards that aren't all accurately charted, especially historically when maritime charts were less precise than today. For aircraft, the region presents challenges as well. The Florida coast has numerous identical-looking islands and keys. In conditions of haze or fog, visual navigation becomes extremely difficult. The strong magnetic variations can throw off compass readings if pilots aren't aware and don't compensate. Add to this human factors: fatigue, stress, overconfidence, poor decision-making, and you have a recipe for disaster. The Flight 19 incident, according to this theory, was a cascade of human errors. Lieutenant Taylor may have become confused about his location. Once he made the initial mistake, his subsequent decisions compounded the error, leading the flight farther from safety. The other pilots, trained to follow their leader, did so even when it meant flying to their deaths. The Martin Mariner that went to search for them exploded due to a fuel leak, a known problem with that aircraft model. The coincidence of timing made it seem connected to the Flight 19 disappearance, but it was actually a separate incident. This explanation is logical, rational, and almost certainly correct for many of the Bermuda Triangle disappearances. But it struggles with certain cases. How does human error explain the complete absence of wreckage in perfect weather? How does it account for the multiple independent reports of equipment malfunctions, strange visual phenomena, and electromagnetic disturbances? Human error should create patterns of mistakes, not patterns of impossible circumstances. Theory 5. Temporal spatial anomalies and time slips. Now we're moving into territory that sounds like science fiction, but stay with me, because the reports from survivors demand we consider possibilities that challenge our understanding of reality. Some researchers have proposed that the Bermuda Triangle might be a location where the fabric of spacetime is unstable, creating temporary portals or distortions that transport objects to other locations, other times, or even other dimensions. This sounds absurd until you read the accounts from people who claim to have experienced time anomalies in the triangle. Bruce Jernon, a pilot, reported in 1970 that he flew through a strange tunnel-shaped cloud formation in the Bermuda Triangle. According to his account, his electronic equipment went haywire, he lost radio contact, and when he emerged from the cloud, he found himself over Miami Beach far sooner than should have been possible. His flight had somehow covered the distance in a fraction of the expected time. He claims to have experienced what he calls an electronic fog that defied normal meteorological explanation. Jernon's account has been widely discussed and debated. Skeptics point out that wind conditions could have given him an unexpected tailwind, or that his instruments were malfunctioning and giving him inaccurate readings. But Jernon insists that what he experienced was beyond any normal atmospheric phenomenon. And he's not alone. Other pilots and sailors have reported similar experiences. Periods of lost time, arrival at destinations much sooner than possible, passage through strange fog or cloud formations that seem to bend light and space in impossible ways. Theoretical physics does allow for the possibility of space-time distortions under extreme conditions. Regions of intense gravitational or electromagnetic energy could, theoretically, warp space-time in measurable ways. But we're talking about energies and conditions that, as far as we know, don't exist naturally on Earth. Creating a wormhole or temporal distortion would require exotic matter, negative energy, or other conditions that we can barely theorize about, let alone detect in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So, is this theory possible? In the strictest sense, physics doesn't absolutely rule it out. Is it likely? That's a much harder question to answer. If temporal anomalies were occurring regularly in the Bermuda Triangle, we'd expect to see effects beyond missing ships and planes. We'd expect to detect gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic signatures, effects on satellite navigation systems. And while there are reports of GPS anomalies in the region, they're not consistent or dramatic enough to suggest space-time distortions. Theory 6. Atlantis and Ancient Technology. This theory ventures into the realm of ancient mysteries and alternative archaeology. Some researchers, most notably Charles Berlitz, who popularized the Bermuda Triangle mystery in his 1974 best-selling book, have proposed that the ruins of the lost city of Atlantis lie on the ocean floor in the Bermuda Triangle, and that ancient technology from this advanced civilization is still active, interfering with modern ships and aircraft. The theory points to the Bimini Road, an underwater rock formation near the Bahamas that some argue is actually an ancient man-made structure. Discovered in 1968, the formation consists of rectangular limestone blocks arranged in what appears to be a linear pattern. Proponents of the Atlantis theory claim this is evidence of an ancient harbor or road, proof that an advanced civilization once inhabited this region. Furthermore, some reports describe strange underwater structures detected by sonar, pyramids on the ocean floor, crystalline formations that don't match known natural geological processes. The theory proposes that these structures contain or are made of materials that generate powerful electromagnetic fields, possibly using geothermal or other energy sources that we don't understand, and that these fields are what interfere with modern navigation equipment. Geologists and archaeologists have studied the Bimini Road extensively. The consensus is that it's a natural formation, created by the fracturing and weathering of beach rock, a type of limestone that forms in coastal environments. The rectangular appearance is due to the natural jointing patterns in the rock, not human construction. Radiocarbon dating of shells embedded in the rock suggests it formed around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, far too recent to be from any ancient Atlantean civilization. As for underwater pyramids and strange structures, most sonar images that have been claimed to show such things have turned out to be misinterpretations of natural geological features, or in some cases, processing artifacts from the sonar equipment itself. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and despite decades of searching, no verified ancient technology or Atlantean ruins have been discovered in the Bermuda Triangle. This doesn't mean Atlantis never existed. That's a separate question. It means that there's no credible evidence linking it to the Bermuda Triangle or to the disappearances that occur there. The theory is romantic, exciting, and captures the imagination, but it's not supported by archaeological or geological evidence. Theory 7. Extraterrestrial or UFO activity. Of all the theories, this is perhaps the most sensational and the one that captures the most public attention. The idea is that the Bermuda Triangle is a site of frequent UFO activity, that extraterrestrial craft use the area as some kind of base or transit point, and that ships and planes disappear because they encounter these craft or are deliberately taken for unknown purposes. UFO reports in the Bermuda Triangle region are actually well documented. Christopher Columbus, in his voyage logs, described seeing strange lights in the sky. Modern pilots and sailors have reported observing craft moving in ways that defy known aerodynamics. Instantaneous acceleration, right-angle turns at high speed, hovering with no visible means of propulsion, submersion into and emergence from the ocean without any splash or disturbance. In 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper reported seeing what he described as a greenish glowing object approaching his spacecraft during one of his Mercury missions. While this wasn't over the Bermuda Triangle, it established that credible, trained observers, people whose careers depended on accurate reporting and stability under pressure, were seeing things in the sky that they couldn't explain. Some proponents of this theory point to reports of USOs, unidentified submerged objects, in the Bermuda Triangle. These are objects detected on sonar moving underwater at speeds and in patterns that don't match any known marine life or human-made submarines. In the 1960s, during naval exercises in the area, the USS Submarine Force allegedly tracked objects moving at hundreds of miles per hour underwater, performing maneuvers that would crush any known submarine from the pressure changes alone. The official explanations for these sonar contacts typically involve equipment malfunctions, schools of fish, or misidentification of natural phenomena. But the reports persist, from credible sources, over decades. Does this prove extraterrestrial activity? No. Does it prove something unusual is happening? That's harder to dismiss. The major problem with the UFO theory is the same problem that plagues UFO research in general: lack of physical evidence. We have reports, testimonies, radar traces, photographs, videos. What we don't have is an actual alien spacecraft to study, indisputable proof that any of the disappearances involved extraterrestrial intervention. The theory can't be proven false, but it also can't be proven true with the evidence currently available. Theory 8. Deliberate disappearances and criminal activity. This is a darker explanation that suggests at least some of the Bermuda Triangle disappearances aren't mysteries at all, they're crimes. Ships have been stolen, scuttled for insurance fraud, hijacked for their cargo. Aircraft have been involved in smuggling operations that went wrong. People have staged their own deaths to escape debts, criminal charges, or unwanted lives. The Bermuda Triangle's proximity to the Caribbean, the Bahamas, and South American drug routes makes it an area with significant criminal activity. During Prohibition, rum runners used these waters extensively. In more modern times, drug smugglers use both sea and air routes through the region. A plane that disappears in the Bermuda Triangle might actually have flown to a remote airstrip, unloaded its cargo, and been stripped for parts. Insurance fraud is another possibility. A ship owner facing financial ruin might arrange for their vessel to disappear while sailing through the triangle, collecting insurance money while the ship is actually sailed to a remote location and sold under a new name, a practice known as ship jumping or barratry. This theory explains some disappearances quite well, particularly those involving small aircraft or boats, where fewer people are involved and coordination is easier. It doesn't require any unusual natural phenomena or supernatural explanations. But it struggles to explain military aircraft disappearances like Flight 19, large commercial vessels with dozens of witnesses, or cases where wreckage should have been found but wasn't. Criminal conspiracies can hide intent, but they can't make several thousand tons of metal vanish from the ocean without trace. Theory 9. Gulf Stream and rapid weather changes. The Gulf Stream is one of the most powerful ocean currents in the world, moving warm water from the Gulf of Mexico up along the eastern coast of the United States and across the Atlantic toward Europe. In the Bermuda Triangle region, the Gulf Stream can flow at speeds exceeding 5 miles per hour, which is incredibly fast for an ocean current. Here's why this matters. A ship or wreckage in the Gulf Stream will be carried rapidly away from where it went down. If searchers are looking in the wrong area, or if there's any delay in beginning the search, the wreckage could be dozens or even hundreds of miles from where anyone is looking. The current could carry debris far out into the Atlantic, where it might sink or be dispersed over such a wide area that finding it becomes effectively impossible. The Gulf Stream also creates weather phenomena. When cold air masses from the north meet the warm waters of the stream, intense storms can develop rapidly. These storms can be localized and brief, creating dangerous conditions that don't show up on regional weather forecasts. A ship or plane could encounter a violent storm that was never predicted and that dissipates before search crews arrive, leaving clear skies and calm seas that give no indication of the disaster that just occurred. Waterspouts, tornadoes over water, are relatively common in the Bermuda Triangle region. These can appear with little warning, are extremely dangerous to both ships and low-flying aircraft, and can dissipate as quickly as they form. A waterspout could sink a small vessel or bring down a plane, and then vanish, leaving investigators with a mystery and no clear cause. This theory is strong for explaining why wreckage isn't always found and why some disappearances occur in apparently good weather. The weather might have been good everywhere except the exact spot where the disaster occurred. But it doesn't account for the equipment failures, the navigational confusion, the reports of unusual phenomena that precede many disappearances. Theory 10. Pilot and captain error compounded by environmental stress. This is an extension of the human error theory, but with a focus on how the environment of the Bermuda Triangle might create or exacerbate human mistakes. The theory proposes that the combination of magnetic anomalies, compass variation, strong currents, rapidly changing weather, and a high volume of traffic creates a perfect storm of conditions that can turn small errors into catastrophic failures. For example, consider Flight 19 again through this lens. Lieutenant Taylor might have initially become confused about his position, a small error. The compass anomalies in the region made it harder for him to correct this error. As he became more stressed and uncertain, his decision-making deteriorated. The other pilots, seeing their leader confused and their own instruments behaving strangely, also became stressed and disoriented. This psychological cascade effect, where one person's uncertainty spreads to others and amplifies, is well documented in aviation psychology. Add in the physical fatigue of flying for hours, the setting sun reducing visibility, and the growing fear that they were lost at sea, and you have a situation where rational thought becomes nearly impossible. For ships, a similar cascade can occur. A captain makes a navigation error. The strong currents push the ship off course faster than realized. The magnetic anomalies make it hard to get accurate bearings. Weather closes in. Stress and fatigue impair judgment. A series of small mistakes compounds into a fatal error. This theory is psychologically and environmentally sound. It doesn't require any unexplained phenomena, just a region where multiple natural hazards converge in ways that make mistakes more likely and more deadly. It explains many disappearances quite well. Where it falls short is in cases with experienced crews in good conditions who reported specific equipment failures or unusual phenomena before disappearing. Theory 11. A combination of multiple factors creating a perfect storm of danger. This is perhaps the most pragmatic and likely explanation, though it's also the least satisfying for those seeking a single dramatic answer. The theory holds that the Bermuda Triangle isn't dangerous because of any single factor, but because of the convergence of multiple hazards, both natural and human-caused, that interact in complex ways. The region has magnetic anomalies that can affect navigation. It has the Gulf Stream creating rapid dispersal of wreckage. It has weather that can change suddenly. It has methane deposits that might occasionally erupt. It has heavy traffic increasing the raw number of vessels at risk. It has rogue waves. It has shallow reefs and hazards. It has criminal activity. And it has human psychology, where the reputation of the triangle itself creates expectation and anxiety that can amplify stress and impair judgment. Most disappearances, according to this theory, have mundane explanations. A few might have unusual explanations involving rare but natural phenomena like methane eruptions or extreme rogue waves. The perception that the triangle is uniquely dangerous is partly due to confirmation bias. People remember the mysterious disappearances and forget the thousands of safe transits. It's partly due to poor record-keeping in earlier centuries, where ships were lost for known reasons but the details were lost over time, leaving only the mystery. And it's partly due to our human love of mystery and our tendency to see patterns even in random events. This theory is intellectually honest and evidence-based. It doesn't deny that unusual things happen, but it contextualizes them within natural phenomena and human psychology. The problem is that it can feel like a non-answer, a way of saying, stuff happens, without truly grappling with the most bizarre and well-documented cases. How is this possible? In 19 minutes, in calm water, 1 mile from shore, a boat with built-in flotation vanishes without trace? Even if it had somehow sunk immediately, which it shouldn't have been able to do, there should have been debris, an oil slick, something floating on the surface. Coast Guard officials were baffled. One officer stated that in his entire career, he had never seen anything like it. The Connemara 4 disappearance in 1955 is equally perplexing. This was a pleasure yacht that disappeared between Bermuda and the United States with 30 people aboard. What makes this case unusual is that there were no distress calls, no reports of bad weather, nothing to indicate any problem. The yacht simply failed to arrive at its destination. An extensive search found absolutely nothing. Here's what's significant. The Connemara 4 was skippered by an experienced captain, had a qualified crew, was well equipped with safety and communication gear, and was making a journey it had made successfully many times before. This was not a risky expedition or an unprepared adventure. It was a routine cruise that turned into an unsolved mystery. The Ciudad de Juarez, a Cuban cargo ship, vanished in 1941 with 45 crew members. The last transmission reported good weather, all systems normal, expected arrival on schedule. The ship never arrived. No wreckage was ever found. This was during World War II, so German U-boat activity was suspected, but there were no U-boats reported in that area at that time, and German records examined after the war showed no submarine attacks matching the time and location. Let me share something that doesn't get discussed enough: the psychological impact on the families of those who disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. When a plane crashes or a ship sinks and wreckage is found, there's closure. Tragic, painful, but a kind of closure. Families can grieve, hold funerals, eventually begin to heal. But when someone disappears in the Bermuda Triangle without any trace, there's no closure. There's only questions. Is their loved one dead? Did they suffer? Could they somehow still be alive somewhere? The not knowing is a special kind of torment. The families of Flight 19 crew members have spent decades seeking answers. Some have investigated independently, combing through Navy records, interviewing anyone connected to the case, searching for any detail that might explain what happened. They've dealt with conspiracy theorists, treasure hunters claiming to have found the wreckage, psychics claiming to have contacted the spirits of the lost men. Every few years, someone announces they've found Flight 19, and the family's hopes rise only to be crushed again when the wreckage turns out to be a different aircraft or nothing at all. In 1991, a salvage company claimed to have found 5 Avenger torpedo bombers off the coast of Florida, the right number and type for Flight 19. The discovery made international news. But when the Navy examined the wreckage, they determined the aircraft's serial numbers didn't match Flight 19. They were different Avengers, lost in different incidents. The families were devastated. Consider the wife of one of the Flight 19 crew members, waiting at home with a young child on December 5, 1945. Her husband kissed her goodbye that morning, said he'd be home for dinner. It was just a routine training flight. She never saw him again. She spent the rest of her life never knowing exactly what happened, never having a grave to visit, never having that final piece of information that would let her move on. She died in the 1990s, 5 decades after the disappearance, still without answers. Think about that. 50 years of not knowing. 50 years of every knock on the door making your heart race, thinking maybe, impossibly, he's come home. 50 years of searching faces in crowds, even though logic says it's impossible. This is the human cost of these mysteries. Now, let's examine what would happen if we made a discovery that fundamentally changed our understanding of the Bermuda Triangle. Imagine that tomorrow, a deep-sea exploration team discovers the wreckage of Flight 19 in an impossible location. Say, hundreds of miles from where they could have flown given their fuel load, or at a depth that suggests they crashed at high speed straight down rather than gliding into the water as a controlled ditching would suggest. Such a discovery would raise more questions than it answers. How did they get there? What happened in those final hours that took them so far off course? And most importantly, why did 5 separate aircraft, with 5 separate pilots, all apparently make the same catastrophic navigational error? Or imagine discovering unusual geological formations on the ocean floor, structures that generate powerful magnetic or electromagnetic fields through natural processes we don't yet understand. This would validate some of the theories about navigational interference, but it would also raise questions about why these formations aren't detectable from the surface, why they don't affect all ships and aircraft equally, and what other effects they might have. What if we discovered evidence of massive methane eruptions, craters on the ocean floor that matched the timing of major disappearances? This would support the methane hydrate theory, but it would also be terrifying. It would mean that vast areas of ocean are sitting on time bombs of frozen gas that could erupt at any moment, making sea travel through those regions genuinely hazardous. The shipping industry would have to fundamentally rethink routes and safety procedures. Or consider a more unsettling possibility. What if we discovered that some of the disappearances were caused by secret military experiments, classified weapons tests, or other government activities that were never disclosed to the public? This would transform the mystery from a natural phenomenon into a conspiracy, with all the dark implications that carries. It would mean that people died, and their families suffered, while authorities knew the truth and chose to hide it. Each of these hypothetical discoveries would shift the paradigm, but none would fully solve the mystery because the Bermuda Triangle isn't a single phenomenon. It's a collection of incidents spanning centuries, each potentially having different causes, different circumstances, different explanations. The mystery extends beyond disappearances. There are accounts of time distortions, where pilots or sailors report losing time or gaining time in ways that don't match their instrumentation or observed conditions. Bruce Jernon's experience is the most famous, but it's not unique. Other pilots have reported similar electronic fog events, where they enter a cloud formation that behaves in ways that defy meteorology. Clouds that form tunnels, that rotate in impossible directions, that glow from within, that seem to follow the aircraft. Some reports describe what witnesses call a whirlpool in the sky, a rotating formation of clouds with a clear center, like a hurricane but localized and much smaller. Aircraft entering these formations report total instrument failure, loss of radio contact, and severe disorientation. Those who emerge from them, and most do, report that their fuel consumption doesn't match the time they believed they were in the formation, either using far more or far less fuel than expected. Are these phenomena related to the disappearances? It's impossible to say, but they suggest that the atmosphere above the Bermuda Triangle might behave in unusual ways under certain conditions, creating hazards that we don't fully understand or know how to predict. The ocean itself is reported to behave strangely in the triangle. Sailors describe areas of water that are the wrong color, bright green instead of blue, or milky white when it should be clear. They describe patches of sea that are perfectly calm while the surrounding waters are rough, or vice versa. They describe bioluminescent displays on a scale that seems impossible, where the entire ocean glows with an eerie light. Some of these phenomena have conventional explanations. Bioluminescence is created by microscopic organisms, particularly dinoflagellates, that emit light when disturbed. In the right conditions, this can create spectacular displays. The Milky Sea phenomenon, where vast areas of ocean glow uniformly, has been photographed from satellites and is a real, if poorly understood, natural occurrence. Changes in water color can result from algae blooms, sediment suspension, or differences in depth and underwater topography. The Bahamas are famous for their brilliant turquoise waters, which result from light reflecting off white sand in shallow areas. From the air, the color variations can be dramatic and might look wrong to someone expecting open ocean blue. But some reports describe phenomena that don't fit these explanations. Water that changes color instantaneously, without the gradual transition you'd expect from moving between areas of different depth or sediment. Bioluminescent displays that pulse in patterns too regular to be natural, that seem to respond to the presence of ships or aircraft. Areas of ocean that feel wrong, where the water has an unusual texture or temperature that instruments can't quite capture but that experienced sailors swear is different. Are these observations accurate, or are they the result of stress, fear, and expectation? When you're in an environment where you've been told strange things happen, your perception can be colored by that expectation. You might interpret normal phenomena as abnormal, see patterns where there are none, remember events in ways that align with the narrative you expect. This is the challenge in studying the Bermuda Triangle. Separating genuine anomalies from misperception, exaggeration, and fabrication is extraordinarily difficult. Even sincere, credible witnesses can be mistaken. Memory is fallible. Instruments can malfunction. Natural phenomena can appear supernatural when encountered without context or understanding. Yet there's a cumulative weight to the reports. When dozens of independent witnesses over decades describe similar phenomena, compass malfunctions, electronic fog, unusual clouds, wrong-colored water, it becomes harder to dismiss all of them as misperception or fabrication. Either something genuinely unusual is happening in this region, or there's a persistent pattern of misperception so consistent that it creates the illusion of a genuine phenomenon. The question of why the Bermuda Triangle specifically has become so famous is worth examining. There are other parts of the ocean where ships and planes disappear under mysterious circumstances. The Dragon's Triangle, also called the Devil's Sea, in the Pacific Ocean near Japan, has a similar reputation. The Sargasso Sea, partially overlapping with the Bermuda Triangle, has been considered dangerous and mysterious since the age of sail. The waters off the southeastern coast of Africa have claimed numerous vessels under unclear circumstances. Yet it's the Bermuda Triangle that has captured global imagination. Why? Part of it is certainly due to Charles Berlitz's 1974 book, The Bermuda Triangle, which became an international bestseller and brought the mystery into popular consciousness. Berlitz presented the disappearances in a compelling, dramatic way, emphasizing the most mysterious aspects and downplaying conventional explanations. His book was criticized for being sensationalistic and for presenting speculation as fact, but it undeniably created the modern conception of the Bermuda Triangle as a place of supernatural danger. The triangle also benefits from geography and timing. It's in the western Atlantic, near the United States, in an area heavily traveled by American commercial and military traffic. When disappearances occurred, they happened to American vessels and were investigated by American authorities, generating extensive English-language records and media coverage. If similar disappearances happened in more remote areas or were documented in other languages, they might not have achieved the same international prominence. The timing of key incidents also matters. Flight 19 disappeared in 1945, just as World War II was ending, when public interest in military operations was high and when the technology of aviation was advancing rapidly, creating a sense that the future was full of both promise and unknown dangers. The disappearances of the Star Tiger and Star Ariel in the late 1940s occurred during the early days of commercial aviation, when flying was still somewhat mysterious and frightening to the general public. These incidents occurred before satellite navigation, before modern weather forecasting, before the communication technologies we take for granted today. The world was a bigger, more mysterious place. A plane could vanish into the ocean and truly be lost in a way that seems almost impossible now, when we can track ships and aircraft anywhere on the planet in real time. Or can we? Even today, with all our technology, aircraft still disappear. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 vanished in 2014 with 239 people aboard, and despite the most expensive search in aviation history, the main wreckage has never been found. This wasn't in the Bermuda Triangle, it was in the Indian Ocean, but it demonstrates that even in the modern era, the ocean can swallow aircraft so completely that finding them becomes extraordinarily difficult. The ocean is vast beyond human comprehension. The Atlantic Ocean covers about 41 million square miles. The average depth is over 10,000 feet, with trenches extending to depths greater than 27,000 feet. We've mapped more of the moon's surface than we have of the ocean floor. There are underwater mountain ranges we've never fully explored, trenches we've barely scratched the surface of, and vast expanses of deep water that have never been surveyed in detail. In this context, the fact that wreckage from Bermuda Triangle disappearances hasn't been found becomes less mysterious. If an aircraft crashes into deep water and sinks intact, it might come to rest in a position where it's effectively invisible to sonar, nestled in a crevasse or covered by sediment. A ship that sinks in a strong current like the Gulf Stream might be carried miles from its last known position before settling on the bottom. And if the search area is based on inaccurate last known positions, which they often are, searchers might be looking in entirely the wrong part of the ocean. This doesn't make the disappearances less tragic, but it does make them less inexplicable. The ocean keeps its secrets not because of any supernatural curse, but because it's simply too vast and too deep for us to search thoroughly with current technology. Yet this rational explanation, while comforting in its logic, doesn't fully account for all the evidence. It doesn't explain multiple independent compass failures on multiple aircraft in Flight 19. It doesn't explain ships like the Witchcraft disappearing in 19 minutes 1 mile from shore in calm seas. It doesn't explain the complete absence of debris from aircraft that should have scattered wreckage over wide areas. So we're left with a puzzle. Some pieces fit conventional explanations. Some pieces don't quite fit, but could with additional information or a better understanding of rare natural phenomena. And some pieces seem to defy explanation entirely, demanding either that we expand our understanding of what's possible or that we acknowledge limitations in the evidence and testimony we're relying on. The relevance of the Bermuda Triangle today is interesting to consider. Is it still dangerous? Are ships and planes still disappearing? The answer is yes. Vessels still go missing in the region, but at a rate that doesn't appear statistically higher than in other comparable areas of ocean. Modern navigation technology, GPS, satellite communication, advanced weather forecasting, has made ocean travel significantly safer. Ships don't rely on magnetic compasses for primary navigation anymore. Aircraft have redundant navigation systems, radar, transponders that allow them to be tracked continuously. The last high-profile disappearance in the Bermuda Triangle was probably the cargo ship El Faro in 2015, which sank during Hurricane Joaquin with 33 crew members. This was a tragedy, but not a mystery. The ship was caught in a Category 3 hurricane. The investigation determined that the captain made errors in judgment by sailing into the storm's path, and that the ship's age and maintenance issues contributed to its sinking. The wreckage was found, the voyage data recorder was recovered, and investigators were able to piece together what happened in considerable detail. This is typical of modern disappearances. They're investigated thoroughly, wreckage is usually found, causes are determined. The mystery element has largely evaporated, not because the Bermuda Triangle has become less dangerous, but because our technology and procedures have become better at preventing disasters and understanding them when they do occur. Does this mean the mystery is solved? That the Bermuda Triangle is just an ordinary patch of ocean that acquired an undeserved reputation? That's certainly the position of skeptics, and they make compelling arguments. The statistical data supports them. The scientific evidence supports them. The absence of any verified supernatural or extraordinary phenomena supports them. But mysteries have a way of persisting despite rational explanations. The families of those who disappeared still have no answers. The accounts from survivors who experienced unusual phenomena haven't been explained away. The coincidences and patterns that seem too consistent to be random haven't been fully addressed. And perhaps that's the real answer. The Bermuda Triangle is both an ordinary place made dangerous by natural phenomena, human error, and statistical inevitability, and simultaneously a genuine mystery where some events defy easy explanation. These two things can both be true. The triangle serves as a kind of Rorschach test for how we approach mystery and the unknown. Skeptics see it as an example of how humans find patterns in randomness, how we prefer dramatic narratives to mundane truth, how we elevate coincidence to conspiracy. Believers see it as evidence that the world still contains genuine mysteries, that our scientific understanding is incomplete, that there are forces and phenomena we haven't yet learned to detect or understand. Who's right? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. The beauty and terror of a genuine mystery is that it resists easy categorization. It sits in the uncomfortable space between explanation and wonder, between the known and the unknown. Let me pose a question for you to consider. If you had the opportunity to fly through the Bermuda Triangle or sail across it, knowing everything you now know about the disappearances and the theories, would you go? Would your decision be based on statistics and scientific evidence, or would you feel a visceral unease that transcends logic? Most of us would probably go. We'd tell ourselves that millions of people travel through the Triangle safely every year, that the danger is exaggerated, that modern technology makes the risk minimal. And we'd be right to think that. But would we feel completely comfortable? Would there be a moment, perhaps as we looked out at the endless expanse of ocean or at the clouds forming strange shapes on the horizon, when we wondered? That moment of wondering, that flicker of primal uncertainty, is what the Bermuda Triangle represents. It's a place where the confident assertions of science and rationality meet the whispered warnings of folklore and experience. It's where statistics say one thing, but instinct whispers another. The implications of the Bermuda Triangle mystery extend beyond the specific disappearances. They touch on fundamental questions about how we understand the world. Do we live in a universe that is fully knowable, where every phenomenon can eventually be explained through science and reason? Or are there genuinely inexplicable events, things that will always remain beyond our understanding? Modern science operates on the assumption that the universe is comprehensible, that with enough data and rigorous analysis, we can explain any natural phenomenon. This assumption has been extraordinarily successful. It's given us modern medicine, space travel, computers, all the technological marvels of the modern world. But it's an assumption nonetheless, a philosophical position that can't be proven absolutely. The Bermuda Triangle challenges this assumption, or seems to. If even a single disappearance truly defies all conventional explanation, if even one reported phenomenon represents something beyond our current scientific understanding, it suggests that the universe might be stranger than we've allowed ourselves to believe. But here's the counter-argument. Every previous mystery that seemed inexplicable was eventually explained once we developed the tools and knowledge to understand it. Lightning was once thought to be the weapons of gods. Now we understand it as electrical discharge. Diseases were once attributed to evil spirits or bad air. Now we understand germ theory. The northern lights were once supernatural. Now we know they're caused by solar particles interacting with Earth's magnetic field. By this reasoning, the Bermuda Triangle is simply a mystery we haven't yet solved, not because it's unsolvable, but because we haven't yet developed the right tools or asked the right questions. Given time and continued investigation, reasonable explanations will emerge for even the most baffling cases. Both positions have merit. Both reflect valid ways of engaging with mystery and the unknown. And perhaps the answer is that we should hold both simultaneously, respecting the rigor of scientific investigation while maintaining humility about the limits of our current knowledge. Consider this. What if the truth about the Bermuda Triangle is that it's a place where multiple rare phenomena coincide more frequently than in other regions, creating occasional perfect storms of dangerous conditions? Not supernatural, not a single explanation, but a confluence of factors that individually are understood but in combination create situations we're not prepared for. This would explain why most transits are safe. The dangerous conditions only occur occasionally, when multiple factors align. It would explain why the disappearances don't follow a predictable pattern. The triggering conditions are rare and hard to predict. It would explain why wreckage is seldom found. The same currents and conditions that create the danger also disperse evidence rapidly. It's not a dramatic explanation. It doesn't involve portals to other dimensions, alien abductions, or ancient Atlantean technology. But it acknowledges that the Bermuda Triangle might genuinely be more hazardous than other regions, not because of a curse or supernatural forces, but because of an unlucky convergence of natural factors. The unanswered questions remain, though, and they're worth acknowledging. Why do multiple independent compasses fail simultaneously? Why do experienced navigators become so disoriented that they can't determine basic directions? Why do some disappearances leave absolutely no trace when they should leave extensive wreckage? Why do the patterns of electrical interference, visual anomalies, and equipment malfunctions recur across different incidents decades apart? These questions don't have satisfying answers yet. Maybe they will eventually. Maybe they won't. But they're real questions, based on documented evidence and credible testimony, and they deserve serious consideration rather than dismissal. The cultural impact of the Bermuda Triangle is itself worth examining. The mystery has inspired countless books, documentaries, movies, and television shows. It's become a metaphor in popular culture for any mysterious disappearance or inexplicable event. When someone vanishes without explanation, we might say they've entered the Bermuda Triangle, even if they're nowhere near the Atlantic Ocean. This cultural resonance speaks to something deep in human psychology. We're drawn to mysteries, to the unexplained, to the possibility that the world is more complex and strange than our daily experience suggests. The Bermuda Triangle feeds that hunger for wonder, for the possibility that despite all our technology and knowledge, there are still things that can surprise us, frighten us, humble us. But there's a darker side to this fascination. The Triangle has become a magnet for conspiracy theorists, pseudoscientists, and hucksters selling books or documentaries that present speculation as fact, that manipulate evidence to support predetermined conclusions, that profit from people's fascination with mystery while showing little regard for truth or for the families of those who disappeared. This is the challenge in engaging with the Bermuda Triangle mystery responsibly. We should remain open to genuine questions and puzzling evidence. We should be willing to consider unconventional explanations if the evidence demands it. But we should also be rigorous in our evaluation of claims, skeptical of assertions that lack supporting evidence, and honest about the limits of what we actually know versus what we speculate. The families of those who disappeared deserve this balance. They deserve investigators who take the mystery seriously, who don't dismiss their loved ones' disappearances as simple accidents without thorough examination. But they also deserve honesty, not false hope from charlatans claiming to have found wreckage or to know the truth about what happened. Many of the family members have spent years or decades searching for answers. Some have funded private investigations, hired researchers, consulted with experts trying to understand what happened. Others have made peace with never knowing, accepting that some questions don't have answers, that some losses can't be explained or understood. There's a particular poignancy to the Bermuda Triangle disappearances because they're so complete. When someone dies in a car accident or from an illness, there's grief, but there's also finality. When someone disappears without trace, the grief is complicated by uncertainty, by the impossibility of closure, by the way the mind keeps returning to questions that have no answers. Imagine being a child whose parent disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. You grow up with a mystery instead of a memory, with questions instead of answers. Do you search for explanations, or do you try to move on? Do you read every new theory, follow every claimed discovery, hoping that this time it will be real, this time you'll finally know? Or do you try to protect yourself from that hope because disappointment is too painful? These are the human dimensions of the mystery that often get lost in the excitement of theories and speculation. Real people lost their lives. Real families lost loved ones. The mystery isn't an entertaining puzzle. It's a tragedy that happened to actual human beings with names, faces, dreams, and people who loved them. Flight 19's 14 men were someone's son, someone's husband, someone's father, someone's friend. The same is true for every person who disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. They weren't characters in a story. They were real people who woke up on what they thought would be an ordinary day and never came home. This is worth remembering when we discuss the mystery. It's worth holding in our minds alongside the theories and speculations. Because ultimately, the reason we care about solving these mysteries isn't just intellectual curiosity. It's because people deserve to be remembered, their losses deserve to be acknowledged, and their families deserve whatever answers we might be able to provide. As we approach the end of this exploration, let's consider what the future might hold for the Bermuda Triangle mystery. Will we ever definitively solve it? Will advancing technology finally allow us to search the ocean floor thoroughly enough to find the missing wrecks? Will new scientific discoveries explain the phenomena that currently puzzle us? It's possible. Deep-sea exploration technology is advancing rapidly. Autonomous underwater vehicles can now search vast areas of ocean floor that were previously inaccessible. Satellite technology can detect subtle ocean surface features that might indicate wreckage below. AI and machine learning can analyze vast datasets looking for patterns that human researchers might miss. If Flight 19 is ever found, the discovery would be momentous. The aircraft could be examined for structural failures, damage patterns, anything that might explain what happened. The navigational instruments could be studied to see if they show evidence of the reported malfunctions. It wouldn't answer every question, but it would provide data that could confirm or refute various theories. The same is true for any of the missing vessels. Each discovery would add a piece to the puzzle, would help us understand whether these disappearances have common factors or are individual tragedies with separate explanations. But even if we find wreckage, even if we can determine proximate causes of individual disappearances, we may never fully explain the mystery of why this particular region has accumulated such a reputation, why the patterns of strange phenomena recur, why some incidents seem to defy conventional explanation. And perhaps that's acceptable. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, to remind us that for all our knowledge and technology, we don't have all the answers. The ocean is still vast, still powerful, still capable of keeping its secrets. The atmosphere still produces phenomena we don't fully understand. The Earth still holds surprises that confound our expectations. The Bermuda Triangle stands as a testament to the limits of human knowledge and control. It's a place where, despite all our advances, nature can still assert itself, where the unexpected can still occur, where the confident predictions of science sometimes give way to the humbling reality of how little we truly understand about the complex systems that govern our world. As you sit wherever you are, reading or listening to these words, the Bermuda Triangle exists out there in the Atlantic Ocean, unchanging and indifferent to our theories about it. Ships and planes transited daily, most arriving safely at their destinations, some experiencing minor equipment glitches or weather delays, and very occasionally, one disappearing into the mystery that has claimed so many before. The next disappearance could happen today, tomorrow, next year. Or it might never happen again. The triangle might fade from a place of active mystery into historical curiosity, something our grandchildren read about as an example of how past generations perceived risk and mystery. Or it might deliver a new incident so baffling, so undeniable, that it reignites the controversy and forces us to reconsider everything we think we know. We can't predict which future will unfold. We can only observe, document, investigate, and try to understand. We can honor those who were lost by not forgetting them, by continuing to search for answers even when those answers seem impossibly distant. We can balance healthy skepticism with genuine openness to evidence. We can admit what we don't know while working to expand what we do know. The Bermuda Triangle is many things. It's a geographic location, a shipping route, a region of ocean subject to natural forces we're still working to understand. It's also a symbol, a mystery, a question that humanity has been asking for generations and may continue asking for generations more. It's a place where statistics and individual cases tell different stories, where the scientific consensus and the testimony of witnesses don't always align, where our desire for rational explanation meets the stubborn reality of events that resist easy categorization. It's a reminder that the world is larger and stranger than we sometimes remember, that the ocean that covers most of our planet is still mostly unexplored, still capable of surprise, still holding secrets that might never be revealed. And it's a tragedy, a collection of individual losses that add up to a mystery, each one representing lives cut short, potential unrealized, families broken by absence and uncertainty. As our journey through this mystery comes to a close, consider one final question. What does the Bermuda Triangle mystery tell us about ourselves, about how we process the unknown, about what we're willing to believe and what we need to question? The answer, like the mystery itself, is complex and perhaps ultimately personal. We each bring our own perspective to these questions, our own balance of skepticism and wonder, our own comfort level with uncertainty and unanswered questions. Some will finish this exploration convinced that the Bermuda Triangle is nothing more than a myth, an ordinary patch of ocean that has been sensationalized beyond reason. They'll point to the statistics, the lack of definitive evidence for extraordinary phenomena, the reasonable explanations that exist for most disappearances. And they'll have valid points. Others will finish convinced that something genuinely unusual happens in the triangle, that the patterns are too consistent to be coincidence, that the testimony of credible witnesses can't all be dismissed, that absence of proof isn't proof of absence. And they too will have valid points. Most of us will probably end up somewhere in the middle, acknowledging the legitimate mysteries while remaining skeptical of the most extreme claims, open to evidence while demanding rigor, fascinated by the unknown while respecting the boundaries of what we can actually verify. And that's perhaps the most appropriate response to a genuine mystery. Not certainty in either direction, but a willingness to hold the question open, to remain curious, to follow where evidence leads while acknowledging the limits of what we currently know. The Bermuda Triangle isn't going anywhere. It will still be there tomorrow, next week, next century. The ocean will still flow through that space between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. Ships will still sail those waters. Aircraft will still fly overhead. Most will complete their journeys safely. Some won't. And we'll continue to wonder why. The mystery endures because the ocean endures, because human curiosity endures, because the fundamental questions about what's possible and what's explainable continue to drive us forward. We solved the mysteries of lightning and disease and the aurora. We split the atom and traveled to the moon. We've decoded the human genome and photographed black holes. Surely, we can solve the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. Surely, with all our technology and knowledge, we can explain what happens in that stretch of ocean and why so many have been lost there. But until we do, the mystery remains. The questions linger. The families wait for answers. The ocean keeps its secrets. And somewhere out there, in waters that look no different from any other part of the Atlantic, the boundary between the known and the unknown remains as real and as impenetrable as it was when Flight 19 radioed that everything was wrong, that they couldn't find west, that even the ocean looked strange. The last words transmitted from Flight 19 echo across the decades. We're completely lost. In a way, we still are. Lost in a mystery that refuses to be solved, a puzzle that resists our attempts at explanation, a question that has no answer we can currently prove. The Bermuda Triangle remains, unchanged and unchanging, waiting. Waiting for us to finally understand it. Waiting for the next vessel to pass through safely, or to disappear into legend. Waiting, with the patience of the ocean itself, for us to either solve its mystery or accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. And in that waiting, in that uncertainty, in that space between explanation and wonder, the triangle continues to capture our imagination, to challenge our assumptions, to remind us that for all we know, there is still so much we don't. The curse of the Bermuda Triangle, if it exists, might not be in the disappearances themselves. It might be in how the mystery haunts us, how it refuses to be forgotten or explained away, how it sits at the edge of our knowledge, asking questions we can't quite answer. But perhaps that's not a curse at all. Perhaps it's a gift, a reminder that the world still holds wonders and terrors beyond our understanding, that exploration and discovery are never finished, that no matter how much we learn, there will always be one more mystery waiting just beyond the horizon, beckoning us forward into the unknown. The Bermuda Triangle waits, as it has always waited, as it will always wait. The question is, what will it reveal next? And will we be ready for the answer when it comes?